I was 16 the first time my stepmother looked at me like I didn't belong in my own house. Not anger, not hatred, calculation. The kind of look you give a stain you haven't decided how to remove yet. My mother had been dead for 3 years. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. The kind that doesn't give you time to argue with God. My father remarried Lydia because he was lonely, not because he was foolish. That distinction matters, because people later said he was weak. He wasn't. He just trusted the wrong woman. At first, Lydia played the role perfectly. Warm voice. Soft smiles. Food always ready when my father came home. She called me Eric, my son, in front of guests. She corrected people when they called her my stepmother. But when my father traveled, the house changed temperature. Doors closed harder. Food disappeared faster. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. I told myself I was imagining it. That's how manipulation begins. Small things first. My allowance forgotten. School fees paid late. Teachers suddenly calling me into offices, asking why my grades were slipping, even when they weren't. Lydia spoke to them before I did. She always spoke first. When my father died in a car accident on the Ibadan Expressway, my life didn't end that day. It was edited. At the funeral, Lydia held me like a grieving mother. Cameras captured it. Relatives praised her strength. Pastors prayed over her future. No one prayed over mine. 2 weeks later, she sat me down at the dining table. Same table where my mother used to braid my hair. Eric, she said gently, you're a young man now. We need to make some decisions. That sentence took everything. She said the company was too complicated, that the house needed stability, that my father had left arrangements. She spoke softly while removing me piece by piece. I didn't know lawyers. I didn't know documents. I didn't know that signatures could erase blood. By the time I understood what had happened, I was sleeping in my uncle's unfinished shop, my clothes in a nylon bag, my name absent from everything my father built. Lydia told people I chose independence. That life followed me for years. And the worst part, people believed it. Lydia did not throw me out. She edited me out. There's a difference. People notice violence. They ignore erasure. The first thing she took was my room. She said it was too big for one boy, that it reminded her of my father. She moved me to the storage room near the back stairs. A mattress on the floor. A fan that rattled like it wanted to escape. She said it was temporary. It never is. The second thing she took was my name. She stopped introducing me as her son. I became Eric. He became distant. He became complicated. He became a reminder. The third thing she took was time. She controlled schedules. Doctors. School meetings. Bank visits. She always went alone. She always came back with answers already decided. When I asked questions, she smiled the way adults smile at children who ask about things beyond their understanding. I learned quickly that curiosity made her colder. So I learned silence. After my father's death, the house filled with visitors and left me empty. Relatives ate in the living room while I washed plates in the kitchen. They spoke about inheritance like I wasn't blood. They spoke about Lydia like she was a saint. She cried on cue. She prayed loudly. She hugged tightly in public and released sharply in private. She told people I needed discipline, that grief had made me difficult, that she was doing her best. That sentence followed her everywhere and protected her like armor. She took me to a lawyer once. She said it was about guardianship. I didn't know what that meant. I trusted her because adults are taught to trust adults. The papers were thick. The language was heavy. She pointed where to sign. She said it was for school. She said it was for stability. She said my father would want this. I signed. My hand shook, but she held it steady. After that day, my access to money stopped. Not reduced. Stopped. When I asked, she said budgets were tight. When I asked again, she said I needed to learn responsibility. When I tried to get a job, she told my uncle I was rebellious. When I stayed quiet, she told people I was withdrawn. She shaped the narrative while I was still learning the alphabet of survival. The night she finally told me to leave, she didn't raise her voice. She stood in the doorway and said the house was not healthy for me, that I needed space, that men grow stronger away from comfort. She packed my clothes neatly. She handed me a bag. She gave me transport money like a tip. She said she would call. She never did. I slept in places that smelled like rust and fear. I ate when people forgot food was theirs. I watched classmates plan futures while I planned tomorrow. I called Lydia once. My phone rang until silence. I learned that silence can be taught. That was the year something hardened in me. Not anger, not hate, a decision. I would never again rely on someone who smiled while cutting me. That decision didn't make me rich. It made me patient. And patience is more dangerous than rage. The years that taught me hunger. Hunger is not just the absence of food. It is the presence of fear. Every morning I woke up not knowing where the next meal would come from or whether I deserved it. I learned to eat slowly because you never know when it will be the last time for a while. I learned to drink water to silence the pain. I learned that pride is expensive and hunger is patient. I stayed with my uncle until he grew tired of explaining why another mouth slept in his shop. People don't say they are tired of you. They say things like you are old enough now. You should find your way. You are strong. You look like your father. That one hurt the most because my father would never have watched me shrink like that. I moved again. This time to a room shared with two boys who didn't ask questions because they were running from their own stories. We slept in shifts. We worked in shifts. We dreamed in fragments. I took any job that didn't ask for documents. I washed cars. I carried cement. I stood under the sun holding signs for businesses that didn't know my name. My hands cracked. My back aged. My mind stayed sharp because suffering sharpens you whether you like it or not. At night I replayed everything Lydia ever said to me. Not because I missed her, but because patterns matter. She always spoke in preparation. She never reacted. She arranged. She anticipated. She moved first. That was when I understood something important. She didn't win because she was cruel. She won because she was early. I promised myself something then. Not that I would defeat her. Not that I would expose her. But that I would never again be late to my own life. I studied at night using borrowed books. I listened more than I spoke. I watched how men with power behave quietly. I noticed they never rushed. They let others underestimate them. I saved money in small amounts. I lost it sometimes. I learned again. I failed exams. I passed others. I slept hungry and woke up stubborn. There were nights I imagined confronting Lydia, screaming, telling everyone what she did. But imagination is cheap. Action is expensive. I chose to save. When I finally got into a small private college through a sponsor who believed discipline was louder than pity, I didn't celebrate. I calculated. I studied business because systems fascinated me. How paper could move people. How signatures could move lives. How silence could move money. I graduated without ceremony. No family. No applause. Just a handshake and a door slightly open. I stepped through it carefully because doors close fast when you don't belong. That was when the world started to change. Not loudly. Not kindly. But steadily. My first real job did not come from brilliance. It came from obedience. I showed up early. I left late. I asked questions only when necessary. I watched how decisions were made in hallways, not meetings. I learned that titles matter less than access. I started in logistics because movement tells the truth about business. If you know where things come from and where they go, you know who is lying. I kept records nobody asked for. I noticed discrepancies nobody wanted to explain. I didn't accuse. I waited. When the company lost a contract because of missing inventory, I produced documents calmly. The room went quiet. The man who trained me avoided my eyes. The man who owned the company asked my name twice. That was my first promotion. Not because I demanded it, but because I arrived prepared. I repeated that pattern everywhere I went. I left companies not in anger, but in increments. Always after extracting knowledge. Always after building contacts. Always after making myself replaceable on paper, but irreplaceable in reality. I started consulting quietly. People paid me to fix problems they couldn't admit publicly. I never spent loudly. I dressed simply. I lived below my means. I understood something Lydia never did. Control is easier when no one knows you have it. I began investing. Small stakes first, then partnerships, then silent equity. I never put my face forward. I let louder men take credit. I let greed blind them. I wrote everything down. I registered companies under holding structures that looked boring and harmless. Names that sounded like stationery suppliers and maintenance firms. No drama. No ambition. Just infrastructure. That was when real money came. Not sudden, not flashy, but deep. The kind that keeps coming even when you sleep. One night while reviewing accounts, I searched Lydia's name out of curiosity. Her face appeared everywhere. Magazines, charity events, business panels. She was being praised for resilience, for building an empire after loss. I closed the page without emotion. That chapter was not yet open, but it would be. I didn't rush it. I waited until my name no longer needed haze to stand. That took years. And when the moment finally came, I did not feel excitement. I felt readiness. Readiness is colder than joy. Revenge does not arrive as anger. It arrives as clarity. The idea came to me on a normal afternoon while I was approving budgets that could feed villages. I was watching a junior executive panic over a small mistake, and I realized power is not about destruction. It is about exposure. You don't break people. You let them see themselves. That was when Lydia returned to my thoughts. Not as a wound, but as a case study. She had built her life on appearance, on narrative, on being seen as the woman who endured and succeeded. She didn't fear courts. She feared shame. She feared public correction. That understanding shaped everything. I did not want to confront her. I wanted to complete her story in public. I researched quietly. I hired investigators who did not ask emotional questions. They brought facts, bank trails, property transfers, old emails, storage backups she forgot existed. She was careless in one way. She believed time erased evidence. She did not know time preserves it for patient people. I found the gap, the place where truth could stand without me shouting. And then I designed the gift. The car was not about luxury. It was about volume. Nothing commands attention like excess. People ignore documents. They worship spectacle. I needed something that would pull cameras before pulling truth. 530 million Nigerian Nairas was not the cost. It was the amplifier. I arranged everything without her knowledge. When I finally contacted her after years, she cried on the phone. She said she prayed for me. She said she always believed I would succeed. I apologized for disappearing. She forgave me instantly. That told me everything. People who are innocent hesitate. People who are guilty rush reconciliation. She invited me home. I declined politely. I said I was planning something special. That word made her excited. She began telling people her son had returned. She rewrote history again. This time I let her. The event was planned with precision. Guest list curated. Lighting tested. Sound rehearsed. Nothing left to chance. When the day came, I watched her stand proudly beside me. I felt no hatred. Just distance. The distance between who I was and who she thought I still was. And that distance was enough to destroy her. The night of the presentation felt unreal, not because of nerves, but because of silence inside me. Once upon a time, I would have been shaking. This time my hands were steady. The venue was perfect. Expensive without shouting. Classical music low enough to suggest class, not emotion. The kind of place where reputations are exchanged quietly. Lydia arrived dressed in white. People always wear white when they want to be seen as clean. She hugged me tightly. Her perfume was the same one she used years ago. It smelled like memory and denial. She introduced me to everyone as her son. She said she never gave up on me. I smiled because lies sound strongest when spoken confidently. The car sat under the silk cover like a secret waiting to breathe. I watched the crowd admire it before seeing it. That mattered. People love what they imagine more than what they own. When I took the microphone, the room softened. They expected gratitude. They expected forgiveness. They expected a success story tied neatly with reconciliation. I gave them truth instead, but slowly. I spoke about lessons, about patience, about growth, about honoring those who shaped us. Lydia nodded proudly. Then I shifted. I said the car was not a gift. A single sentence can change temperature. The room cooled. People stopped smiling. Lydia laughed nervously. That laugh cracked when I explained what the car contained. Evidence is powerful, but context makes it lethal. I did not accuse her. I described actions without names. I described a young boy erased legally. I described signatures obtained through trust. I described power abused quietly. Then I said her name. Not loud. Not angry. Just factual. She reached for my arm. I stepped away. That movement said more than words. When the cover came off and cameras flashed, the irony was complete. The most expensive object in the room carried the cheapest thing she ever gave me. The truth. Her face folded in on itself. She did not scream. She did not argue. She sat down because strength leaves before collapse. Security tightened. Lawyers exchanged looks. Pastors avoided eyes. She had been exposed not as a villain, but as ordinary. A woman who chose convenience over conscience. That night ended without chaos. That was intentional. Chaos would have given her sympathy. Silence gave her consequence. When people left, they did not congratulate her. They did not comfort her. They left quickly like they had touched something hot. That is how reputations die. Not in fire, but in withdrawal. By sunrise, the city had already decided who Lydia was. Social media exploded with clips of the presentation. Everyone saw her tears, her forced smiles, the pause before I revealed the truth. Headlines ran, "Stepmother exposed by son's 530 million Nigerian Naira's gift, Lagos socialite shamed silently, Eric Adebayo's quiet justice stuns nation." People whispered her name differently now. Not admiration, not faith. Curiosity mixed with disbelief. Banks called my lawyers for verification. Former business partners asked if the evidence was real. Even old friends of Lydia who once praised her resilience went silent. No one wanted to speak first. Silence is contagious. The car was delivered to a private forensic facility. Everything inside, emails, audio recordings, signed statements, bank trails. I did not open them publicly. I let her know they existed. That knowledge is heavier than steel. Her lawyer called my office hours later. He spoke cautiously, politely. "We need to discuss resolution," he said. I told my lawyer, "No. Eric waited 10 years. He is not in a hurry." That sentence traveled faster than any press release. Lydia tried to see me. Voicemails piled up. "Eric, please. You don't understand the consequences. I did what I had to do." Her last words, whispered, were, "I raised you." I laughed softly. Raised me. She took a room, a name, money, and time. But she never raised me. She never understood me. The day stretched like molten lead. She could not eat. She could not sleep. Every text, every call, every message reminded her that her actions had consequences far beyond her imagination. Her empire began to shake. Small staff departures. Partners withdrawing quietly. Invitations cancelled. Every pillar she built trembled in the calm aftermath of my patience. By evening, even the media realized this was not spectacle. This was precision. Public humiliation arrived without shouting. The world finally saw Lydia for what she was, ordinary. By the third day after the presentation, the first domino fell. Banks froze 3 of Lydia's corporate accounts pending investigation. Her company's board released statements distancing themselves temporarily while audits were conducted. Sponsors pulled back. Invitations to events stopped. Even socialites who once smiled at her in glossy magazines now lowered their voices when her name appeared. The thing about public disgrace is that it multiplies quietly. You cannot scream at it. It spreads like a shadow. I did not call journalists. I did not leak files. I let her own actions, documented over years, speak louder than anyone could fabricate. Lydia woke up to emails from her own lawyers asking for explanations she had no defense for. Staff came to me quietly, asking if I intended to ruin her completely. I smiled. I did not answer. That question carried its own answer. Her legal team scrambled. Their meetings were frantic. They realized, far too late, that the car was more than a spectacle. It was a coffin for her reputation. By the 5th day, she attempted a controlled narrative on television. She cried. She said I had misunderstood. She framed herself as a woman victimized by circumstances. The audience was sympathetic at first, but the moment I released one audio recording publicly, showing her coldly instructing accountants to manipulate my inheritance, her story collapsed instantly. Comments flooded social media. The tide turned. People stopped believing her. Friends vanished. Allies questioned loyalties. The first domino was tipping, and the others were lined up carefully, silently. Each one would fall in sequence. That night, I slept calmly. Lydia did not. She tried to contact me. I ignored the calls. Every ring, every voicemail, Every text was a reminder to her that patience can be lethal. Lydia's world began to crumble not in courts, not in arguments, but in the quiet spaces that once sustained her. Invitations stopped arriving. Friends who once praised her resilience now pretended not to see her. Business partners whispered apologies for miscommunication while quietly distancing themselves. Even her staff, those who had smiled obediently, started leaving one by one, citing vague reasons: relocation, personal growth, retirement. No one wanted to be associated with a woman whose image had been silently dismantled before the nation. Every restaurant she entered felt colder. Waiters avoided her gaze. Drivers refused her calls promptly. Security guards were polite but firm, reminding her subtly that her presence no longer carried privilege. This was the slowest, cruelest punishment, and it was invisible to anyone who didn't understand control. I did not rush. I let her watch the ground shift beneath her feet. Social media buzzed with subtle commentary. Headlines hinted at scandals she had buried, but could no longer hide. Photos from past events resurfaced. Her smiles, once rehearsed for cameras, now looked hollow. The whispers were louder than shouts. By the 10th day, Lydia realized she was alone. Not legally, not financially, alone in perception. The kind of isolation that poisons confidence and replaces certainty with doubt. She tried to reach me, explaining herself, begging for understanding, claiming she had acted in my interest. I did not respond. Silence had become my instrument. My patience, my quiet, my calculated absence spoke volumes. She moved restlessly in her mansion, the walls echoing memories she had once controlled. Every reflection in the mirror reminded her that she had miscalculated. The woman who once erased me was now undone by her own deeds. After weeks of social isolation and quiet collapse, the legal mechanisms began. I did not rush the courts. I did not shout accusations. I let her lawyers stumble into the facts I had gathered over years. Every email, every bank transfer, every signed document showing misappropriation and manipulation was catalogued, time-stamped, verified. The lawyers called urgently. Lydia begged for delays, claiming illness, overwork, stress. I allowed none. Each delay was a calculated risk. I had prepared for every contingency. The first court date arrived. Cameras were present, but I was calm, seated in the back row. Lydia entered, composed on the surface, but her hands trembled slightly. Every document I submitted painted a picture she could not deny. Public perception had already begun the work. Now, the legal system validated it. Judges asked questions. She answered cautiously. Each response confirmed her involvement. By the second hearing, her corporate accounts were frozen. Her signature authority suspended. Media outlets reported neutrally, but the narrative was clear. The powerful widow had been undone not by violence, not by loud accusation, but by a quiet, relentless patience that no one saw coming. Her allies called me privately, pleading for mercy, for negotiation. I responded with one sentence: justice does not need applause. By the end of the month, court orders redistributed corporate control. Lydia could appeal, but the foundations she had built in Lagos society were cracking. Every public interaction reminded her that the world had already judged. Reputation, once destroyed quietly, is impossible to rebuild. I never gloated. I never celebrated. I watched, calm, as someone who had once erased me learned the cost of manipulation. The 530 million Nigerian Naira's car, the centerpiece of the entire plan, became more than a vehicle. It became a symbol. People whispered about it in restaurants, office buildings, and social events. Did you see the car Eric bought for Lydia? They would ask. Yes, and it carried evidence. No one knew the full story, but everyone understood the message. Luxury had never been so loud without a sound. The car itself sat in a private facility, registered under my name, Ahmed and untouched. It contained digital archives, legal documents, emails, recordings, every piece of proof that mapped the years of theft, manipulation, and erasure. Journalists tried to obtain access. Politicians inquired. Even Lydia's allies called, asking if she could retrieve anything. I did not answer. I let anticipation and fear do the work. The car was photographed, discussed, analyzed. Social media spread images of the unveiling. Every camera captured her expression, the frozen smile, the hands trembling slightly, the eyes that realized too late that control had shifted. It was not a gift. It was a message, and it was delivered louder than any accusation could ever be. For months, people referenced the 530 million car in hushed tones, as if it were a mythical object capable of enforcing justice. Its presence alone reminded Lydia daily of her failure. Every time she left her house, passed a traffic camera, or heard someone mention it, she relived the moment when the truth was revealed publicly yet delivered privately. That was the power of patience. That was the power of preparation. That was the power of silence. Lydia's social and business empire, carefully constructed over decades, began to collapse like a slow landslide. It wasn't explosive. It didn't need to be. Small fractures appeared first. Sponsors quietly pulled funding, citing internal reviews. Partners distanced themselves with vague excuses. Employees who had once looked to her for guidance began leaving silently. Invitations to high-profile events ceased arriving. Even those who had once praised her resilience and leadership avoided eye contact in public spaces. Every interaction became a reminder that her perceived power was an illusion. The courts moved deliberately. Legal challenges required careful documentation, but my team was meticulous. Each document, email, audio clip, and bank record was cross-verified. I didn't rush the process. I let the system work like a machine. Every day that passed, Lydia's confidence eroded. Meetings that once went smoothly now ended in tension. Her staff whispered about uncertainties and risks. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. Every speech, every public appearance, every smile felt rehearsed and hollow. Media outlets ran pieces cautiously, reporting facts but allowing the story of her exposure to dominate the conversation. By the time formal legal decisions arrived, her empire had already weakened from within. A few careful court orders redistributed assets, froze accounts, and restricted her authority. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't publicly humiliated by yelling or scandal. She was dismantled piece by piece, systematically and irrevocably. And through it all, I watched calmly. I never gloated. I did not need to. The dismantling itself was sufficient. Lydia had underestimated patience. She had underestimated preparation. And most of all, she had underestimated me. After the legal and social collapse, Lydia sought me out privately. Not publicly. Not with cameras. She wanted an explanation, some concession, some sign that her world could be rebuilt. I agreed to meet her in a quiet office, neutral ground. She entered, dressed simply, no perfume, no jewelry. The woman who once held power with a smile now looked small, ordinary. Her eyes searched mine for anger, for rage, for any sign she could manipulate me again. She found none. I spoke first. Calmly, each word deliberates. You chose convenience over conscience. Her lips parted, as if to argue, but I held my gaze steady. You erased me, legally and socially. You destroyed my inheritance, my reputation, my home. You smiled while doing it. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. I did what I had to do, she whispered. I protected the family. I shook my head. You protected yourself, not the family. You silenced me because it was easier than truth. The room was heavy. Silence stretched. She swallowed hard. What do you want from me? She finally asked. I leaned back. I want nothing. You already received the verdict life delivers slowly. You lost friends, authority, respect, credibility. You were undone quietly, methodically, precisely, the way you once erased me. That is all you will have. She flinched, realizing the full weight of my words. For the first time, she understood patience can be more terrifying than anger. I did not shout. I did not point fingers. I let my calm speak. Her shoulders sagged. She nodded once, defeated, understanding. That day, she left not humiliated publicly, but collapsed privately. And in her silence, I saw the end of a decade-long manipulation. After our silent confrontation, the legal proceedings continued, But now Lydia moved cautiously, desperately trying to salvage what she could. Every motion she filed was met with counter-evidence meticulously prepared over years. Her lawyers, who had once operated confidently, now tiptoed, afraid that any misstep could open doors I had already planned for. The courts became a stage for precision. I never raised my voice, never demanded headlines. Each document, each audio recording, each bank transfer quietly tore through the narrative she had built. She attempted settlements, hoping I would accept a compromise, but I refused. The law is patient, just like me. The verdicts were calculated to ensure justice without spectacle. She lost corporate control. She lost access to discretionary funds. She lost her ability to manipulate perception. And, most importantly, she lost the subtle illusion that she was untouchable. Public attention had faded, but the consequences remained. Every decision she made, every interaction, reminded her that her empire had been dismantled systematically. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fast. It was inevitable. Patience had become my instrument, law my tool, and silence my amplifier. She realized, too late, that years of erasure and manipulation could be returned quietly, methodically, and without noise. I did not celebrate. I merely observed as the consequences unfolded. Her fall was complete, and in that, I found a rare peace. The 530 million Nigerian Naira's car had served its role. What the world saw as a gift was, in truth, a vessel of revelation. It sat quietly in a secured facility, untouched, registered under my name. Inside, every document, email, audio clip, and bank transfer remained intact. The car became legend. People spoke of it in hushed tones, not because it was expensive, but because of what it represented. It represented justice delivered patiently. It represented patience amplified into consequence. Journalists speculated endlessly. Politicians whispered about its symbolic power. Even Lydia's closest allies, the ones who had once smiled confidently beside her, treated it like an omen. I never used it to boast. I never flaunted it publicly. Its presence alone was enough to remind Lydia daily of her miscalculations. Every time she saw an image of it online, every time she read about it in passing, she relived the unveiling, the calm moment when her private manipulations were exposed to the world silently, but undeniably. The car became a story within the story. People would reference it for years, always emphasizing the price, the spectacle, and the irony. The vehicle she expected to enjoy, now the instrument of her exposure. I did not sell it immediately. I let it exist as a monument to patience, preparation, and precision. Later, I donated the proceeds discreetly to legal aid funds for minors, ensuring that the lessons learned from my experience could protect others. The car had completed its purpose. It was a messenger, a witness, and a legacy of consequence. By the following months, the city, the country, even networks abroad had learned the story of Lydia and the 530 million Nigerian Naira's car. People who had once admired her spoke differently now. Socialites whispered. Business partners reconsidered associations. Invitations stopped arriving. Her image, carefully curated for decades, eroded quietly under the weight of exposure. Public admiration had transformed into distant fascination. Every photograph, every media clip, every post on social media reminded her that the world no longer trusted her. And she knew it. Every dinner, every gala, every phone call carried a subtle judgment. She moved cautiously. Her voice, once commanding, now sounded rehearsed. Her steps, once confident, now faltered slightly when entering rooms where her presence used to dominate. I did not intervene publicly. I did not contact media. I let the consequences ripple silently. It was a lesson in precision. Lydia's empire had crumbled quietly, and in quiet, there is no easy recovery. The most brutal moments were not public but private. Her closest friends stopped calling. Staff who once obeyed without question began leaving. One by one, people she counted on for loyalty abandoned her, citing vague reasons: personal growth, relocation, health. Even her advisors stopped volunteering advice. She realized too late that the network she relied on were only as strong as perception, and perception had shifted irrevocably. Her mansion felt larger, emptier. Conversations in her own home lacked warmth. Mirrors reflected a woman she no longer recognized. I never interfered. I did not gloat. I simply allowed her to experience the weight of isolation, a reflection of the patience and cunning she had once denied me. The court battles continued in parallel. I never rushed them. Every document, every recording, every email had been prepared meticulously over years. My legal team knew precisely when to submit evidence, when to request hearings, when to wait. The judge, impartial and deliberate, observed the facts. Lydia's team tried delays, appeals, and emotional arguments. They attempted to cast doubt, to inject narratives of benevolence, to claim misunderstanding. Each time, I provided proof beyond dispute. She was forced to defend herself against her own words, her own actions. The slow precision of the law mirrored my own preparation. By the final ruling, she had lost corporate authority, access to discretionary trusts, and public credibility. No shouting, no spectacle, just irrevocable consequence delivered methodically. There's a moment when people understand what has happened, not intellectually, but emotionally. Lydia experienced that moment late one evening as she reviewed the remaining assets she still controlled. She realized that her life, meticulously built, was fragile. That every friend, every partner, every employee had been contingent on perception and narrative, and that narrative was gone. I did not speak to her. I did not appeal, but she understood. Years of carefully maintained control evaporated silently. She could appeal. She could negotiate. She could attempt public redemption. But the damage was permanent. The calm execution of patience and preparation had outpaced her schemes. She had lost without drama. Years of planning, patience, endurance, and quiet observation culminated not in chaos, but in closure. I reclaimed my life fully, not just legally, but emotionally. The home I had been erased from was no longer mine, but I no longer needed it. The money she had stolen had been traced, documented, neutralized. The car, the instrument of revelation, had been sold and proceeds quietly donated to legal aid for vulnerable minors. Lydia disappeared from public life. Her name was whispered, but no longer celebrated. Friends and family who once avoided me now understood the depth of patience and preparation. I never celebrated publicly. I did not gloat. Revenge, I learned, is not about destruction. It is about balance. About returning what was taken in the only way that teaches permanence. Calm, patient, and undeniable truth. My name is Eric, and this is the story of a 530 million Nigerian Naira's car. Patience that spanned a decade, and the quiet dismantling of a woman who once erased me while I was still breathing. While the world thought the battle was over, I worked quietly behind the scenes. Evidence I had collected over years was organized into layers, some public, some confidential, some delivered only to people whose silence mattered. I never rushed the releases. Timing mattered. Every interview she gave, every article she wrote, every social appearance was met with subtle counterproof. A photograph here, a recording there, a ledger carefully time-stamped. People began noticing patterns. Lydia could not escape the shadows of her own actions. Friends began questioning what they had overlooked. Her empire, though outwardly intact in parts, trembled quietly in private. I did not need to speak. I only needed to ensure the truth could not be ignored. By the second week of the new revelations, social media began shifting. Bloggers who once praised Lydia for her elegance and resilience now questioned her ethics. They found confirmations of minor manipulations, then connected them to older evidence I had released. The story gained traction, not as scandal, but as pattern. She was forced to answer questions, but each response only revealed more contradictions. Her public appearances felt rehearsed. The sparkle that once convinced audiences of her control now seemed brittle. Friends who once protected her began retreating, citing vague internal conflicts. Reputation, I realized, is the softest foundation for power, and it collapses fastest under silent erosion. The courts were deliberate. Every hearing I attended was strategic. Lydia attempted appeals and motions to dismiss, claiming misinterpretation and misunderstanding. Each attempt was counted with precision. Emails, signatures, recordings. Judges who initially treated the case as technical now questioned her credibility. Her lawyers grew nervous, whispers in the halls revealing panic. One slip, a bank memo she forgot to redact, became pivotal. Her side tried to spin it, but the timestamp confirmed years of deliberate actions. Public attention had shifted from spectacle to respect for the law. I remained calm. I had no outbursts. My silence amplified her anxiety. She began appearing drained, her face hollowed by stress, the smile she once relied upon fading. By month 3, Lydia's isolation was complete. Invitations no longer arrived. Old friends, pressured subtly by financial and social reality, disappeared. Employees who had served her for decades tendered resignations quietly, citing personal reasons. Even distant relatives stopped visiting. The house, which had once felt like a palace of command, now echoed with silence. Every corner reminded her of the man she had tried to erase. The truth was no longer hidden. It was present in every look, every word, every silence around her. She could not escape it. She had created a world dependent on appearance. And appearance alone could not protect her from time, patience, and proof. One evening, she called me. Her voice trembled. She begged for understanding. She claimed intentions had been misunderstood. I said nothing. I listened as she poured excuses, regrets, pleas. When she paused, I asked one question. Do you understand why I waited? Her silence confirmed understanding. She did. She realized patience is louder than rage. She realized that a decade of careful manipulation could be undone quietly, with no shouting, no confrontation, no spectacle. She realized that someone she once dismissed had grown methodical, patient, unstoppable. The last wave of evidence was released quietly. The media received verified proof of her instructions to accountants, lawyers, and third parties to manipulate inheritance, falsify documents, and remove me from the family legacy. Every document, time-stamped, notarized, verified. No editing, no theatrics. The public, even those previously sympathetic, began understanding the full extent of her deception. Social circles that had shielded her now questioned their association. She had been undone quietly, efficiently, irrevocably. With her influence stripped, Lydia attempted to rebuild. She moved houses, changed her appearances, and sought counsel. But trust, once lost, cannot be bought back. Every handshake she extended was met with doubt. Every partnership she sought required scrutiny. The pattern she relied on, fear and control, was gone. She could no longer manipulate perception easily. Her reputation had collapsed under the weight of documentation and silent patience. The last rulings came without fanfare. Corporate control officially transferred. Trusts and funds she had manipulated were legally redistributed. She retained nothing that could harm me or the family legacy. Lawyers representing her were visibly defeated. She had no appeals left. The law had moved at its own pace, but patience and preparation had outmatched all her strategies. By the final court day, she arrived quietly, hoping perhaps for mercy or acknowledgement. She left empty-handed. Not physically, not financially, emotionally. The quiet devastation is always the most effective. The 530 million Nigerian naira's car, long discussed and photographed, had become legend. People spoke of it as the object that carried truth. The vehicle itself became a story told in whispers, extravagant but precise, luxurious yet lethal in message. I never used it publicly again. Eventually, I sold it discreetly, donating the proceeds to legal aid funds for minors. Its purpose had been fulfilled. It had been a vessel for truth, an amplifier for consequence, and a monument to patience. Years later, Lydia lives quietly. The media rarely mentions her. Social events no longer include her name. Friends, allies, and staff have dispersed. And I live with the quiet knowledge that justice, patience, and meticulous planning have restored what was once stolen from me. I never raised my voice. I never screamed. I waited. I prepared. I struck without spectacle, leaving permanence in place of chaos. People who ask about the 530 million Nigerian Naira's car, the trial, the downfall, rarely hear the full story. I smile quietly because that was the point. Revenge is not entertainment. Revenge is restoration. I reclaim my life. I reclaim my voice. I reclaim my narrative. I am Eric, and this story is proof that patience can be louder than rage, preparation stronger than impulse, and truth more powerful than any fortune or facade. Thank you for watching Eric's story unfold, the years of betrayal, patience, and ultimate justice. Remember, true strength isn't in shouting or revenge. It's in preparation, patience, and reclaiming your life quietly but powerfully. If you were inspired by Eric's journey, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more emotional stories of triumph, justice, and life lessons you won't see anywhere else. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because the next story will be even more shocking, emotional, and unforgettable. Your support helps us bring real stories like Eric's to life.